The static hiss of a dying star was humanity's lullaby, a constant whisper of the galaxy's indifference that had replaced the sounds of rain and wind in the collective memory of the survivors. For 70 years, the war against the architects had been a slow, grinding process of erasure. They came not with the fury of conquerors, but with the cold, passionless precision of sculptors chipping away at a flawed stone. Their ships, crystalline structures that sang in the vacuum of space, moved with an unnatural grace, folding reality to bypass humanity's crude kinetic weapons and plasma defenses. They never communicated, never offered terms, and never left survivors. They simply arrived, scoured a world of its biological and cultural footprint, and moved on, leaving behind a perfectly sterile sphere. Earth was a memory, a ghost story told to children born in the metallic wombs of asteroid bases and deep space flotillas. What remained of the human race was a scattered diaspora, a flickering candle in a hurricane, battered but stubbornly unextinguished. We had learned to live in the cracks, to survive on scavenged technology and rationed hope, but we had never learned how to fight back. Every victory was a Pyrrhic one, a trade of a dozen of our ships for one of theirs, a sacrifice that only delayed the inevitable. The architects were not just technologically superior, they operated on a plane of existence that made human strategy feel like a child drawing battle plans in the dirt. Elias Thorne knew the dirt better than most. He wasn't a soldier or a strategist. He was a disgraced xenolinguist, a man whose career had been immolated on the pyre of a single radical theory. He lived in the cramped, recycled air of a research outpost orbiting a gas giant, cataloging the meaningless clicks and whistles of extinct alien species. It was a penance, a quiet exile assigned to him after his grand unified theory of the architects was laughed out of the High Command's War Council. He had proposed that they weren't an empire in the human sense, but a kind of sentient archaeological society, a civilization of curators preserving, or, in humanity's case, purging the galaxy according to some unknowable cosmic blueprint. He'd argued that their technology wasn't invented, but discovered, reverse-engineered from the relics of a precursor race of unimaginable power. He'd claimed that the key to understanding them, to fighting them, lay not in bigger guns, but in deciphering the glyphs they left etched on the dead worlds they curated. They called him a heretic, a fool wasting precious resources on fantasy while humanity burned. Now, his days were a monotonous cycle of translating the fossilized songs of long-dead bird lizards. The irony a constant, bitter companion. His quiet purgatory was shattered by the arrival of the Stalwart, a black-hulled destroyer that looked like a shard of obsidian against the swirling orange clouds of the gas giant. It docked with the station with an urgency that sent tremors through the entire structure. Elias knew before the airlock hissed open who it was for, and there was only one person with the authority to dispatch a warship for a disgraced academic. General Ivan Rostova stood in the corridor, his uniform immaculate, his face a granite mask carved with the grief of 1,000 lost battles. He was a relic himself, a man who had fought since the first shots were fired at the Pluto perimeter, a man who had personally signed the order that ended Elias's career. He didn't offer a greeting, merely a curt nod. "Thorne, you're coming with me." Elias didn't protest. In the shattered remnant of human society, a general's request was not a request. He packed a small bag with his data slate and a few worn books, the last paper volumes he owned, and followed Rostova into the belly of the warship. Inside the Stalwart's briefing room, the air was thick with the grim tension of an impending suicide mission. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a desolate, gray world pockmarked with craters Xylos. It was a dead rock in an uncharted system, notable only for the fact that the architects had been there for the last 3 years. "They aren't sterilizing it," Rostova began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "They're digging. Our long-range intelligence, what little we have, suggests they found something. One of your precursor's relics." Elias felt a cold dread mix with a vindictive surge of validation. He remained silent, letting the general speak. "We believe it's a power source of some kind, but it's more than that. Our quantum sensors have detected temporal distortions emanating from the excavation site. Localized chronoton fields. They're not just powering their fleet with it, they're manipulating time itself." Rostova gestured, and the holodisplay zoomed in, showing a vast, crystalline structure half buried in the rock, glowing with an ethereal blue light. Around it, swarms of smaller architect vessels and drone workers moved with impossible speed. We've seen it in recent battles. Our missiles slow to a crawl as they approach their ships. Their fighters move in ways that defy physics. They're not just faster, they have more time than we do. This device, this anchor, is how they do it. We can't destroy it. Our most powerful weapons would be useless. So, we're going to steal it. The sheer audacity of the plan hung in the air like a shroud. Steal from the gods who had kicked humanity out of its own Eden. "Why me?" Elias finally asked, his voice hoarse. Rostova's gaze was hard. "Because the entire excavation site is shielded. Not just from energy weapons, but from any form of conventional or quantum hacking. The system is completely isolated. However, our operatives sacrificed themselves to get us this." He flicked a finger, and a new image appeared, a complex, spiraling glyph, glowing with the same blue light as the anchor. It was a language Elias had only ever seen in fragmented data recovered from ruined planets, the very language he'd built his career on. The system seems to respond to linguistic commands, an archaic dialect. Your dialect. Elias stared at the glyph, a symbol that was both alien and intimately familiar. It was a key, and he was the only living human who knew how to turn it. He was taken to a secret staging ground, a hollowed-out asteroid known only as Terminus. It was here he met the rest of his ghost platoon. The mission commander was Major Kaylin Reed, a woman whose eyes held the cold, flat emptiness of someone who had seen too much death. She regarded Elias not as a person, but as a peculiar tool she was being forced to use. Her disdain was a palpable force. "You're the linguist," she stated, her voice devoid of inflection. "You will do exactly as I say when I say it. You are a civilian asset, which means you are expendable. Do you understand?" Elias nodded, his throat tight. He understood perfectly. The mission's tech specialist was a wiry man with cybernetic eyes that whirred softly as they scanned Elias from head to toe. "Dr. Eris Vance." He introduced himself, offering a hand that felt more like metal than flesh. "Don't mind the Major. Her bedside manner is legendary. I'm the one who gets us in. You're the one who opens the door." Eris led Elias to his laboratory, a chaotic maze of wires, holographic schematics, and disassembled alien technology. In the center of the room stood 3 body-sized pods. "This is your ticket onto Xylos," Eris explained, tapping one of the pods. "The architects don't use slaves, but they do employ servitor races, biologically engineered species designed for specific tasks. Their entire security system is based on biosignatures. Get close without the right signature, and you're atomized before you can blink." He pulled up a holographic image of a creature, a slender, gray-skinned biped with multiple joints in its limbs and a featureless face. This is a Genusian, a race they engineered for grunt labor. Our bioforges can temporarily rewrite your genetic code, reshape your physiology to mimic them. It's unpleasant, but it will make you invisible to their scanners. Elias looked at the alien form and then at the pod. A wave of nausea washing over him. He was being asked not only to risk his life, but to shed his very humanity to do it. The journey to the Xylo system was a week of silent, suffocating tension. Elias spent the time studying the fragmented precursor language, his mind a whirlwind of declensions and syntax that no human had ever spoken aloud. Major Reed drilled her small team of 4 commandos with ruthless efficiency, their movements a blur of deadly precision. Eris refined his instruments, delicate tools designed to interface with systems that were millennia older than the human race. Elias felt like a ghost among them, a scholar trapped in a warrior's nightmare. He and Reed barely spoke, her silence a constant judgment. His only conversations were with Eris, who seemed to view the entire mission as the ultimate technical challenge, a delightful puzzle to be solved. Imagine it, Elias, Eris would say, his cybernetic eyes glowing. To touch technology that can bend time, to understand it. This is a tomb and a treasure. Elias saw only the tomb. The ship, a small stealth corvette named the Whisper, dropped out of hyperspace behind Xylos's largest moon. The dead world filled the main view screen, a canvas of gray and black under the light of a distant white star, and on its surface, a scar. The architect excavation site was a geometric wound of impossible scale, a network of crystalline towers and deep, glowing shafts that pulsed with a rhythmic blue energy, the heartbeat of the Kronos anchor. It was beautiful and terrible, a testament to the power that had shattered their civilization. "It's time," Major Reed announced, her voice cutting through the hushed awe on the bridge. "Suit up." In the medbay, the pods waited. Elias stripped down to a simple gray jumpsuit and lay down in the designated pod, his heart hammering against his ribs. The lid hissed shut, plunging him into darkness. He heard Eris's voice over the intercom, calm and clinical. "The process will take approximately 15 minutes. There will be discomfort. Try not to fight it." A needle pricked his neck, and a cold fluid flooded his veins. Then the pain began. It was not a sharp, clean pain, but a deep cellular agony, a feeling of being unmade and remade simultaneously. His bones felt like they were softening, his joints cracking and reforming. His skin stretched, his muscles tore and reknitted themselves into a new and terrifying configuration. He wanted to scream, but his lungs were changing shape, and he could only manage a choked, gurgling gasp. It felt like an eternity. When the lid opened, Elias saw his reflection in the polished metal of the ceiling. A monster stared back. His skin was the color of slate, his limbs were long and multi-jointed, and his face was a smooth, featureless mask. He lifted a hand, flexing slender, 4-jointed fingers. It was his hand, but not. He could feel his mind, his consciousness, trapped inside this alien shell. Major Reed and her team were already standing, their new forms moving with an unsettling, insect-like grace. Eris was the last one out, his cybernetic eyes the only familiar thing in his new visage. "Biosignatures are stable," Eris stated, his voice coming out as a series of resonant, harmonic clicks, translated into Elias's ear by a neural implant. "Welcome to the masquerade." They were ferried down to the surface in a small lander designed to mimic an automated architect cargo drone. As they descended, the scale of the operation became terrifyingly clear. The central pit was miles deep, and at its bottom, the Kronos anchor pulsed, a captive star of blue energy. Crystalline structures soared into the thin atmosphere, and the ground teemed with thousands of servitors like them, all moving with a shared, mindless purpose. Their lander settled onto a vacant platform without ceremony, its ramp lowering into the heart of the enemy's fortress. Major Reed turned to the small group, her featureless face somehow conveying a look of grim determination. From this moment on, we do not exist. We are machines. We follow the flow of workers. We do not deviate, and we do not stop until we reach the objective. One mistake, and we all die. With that, she stepped out onto the alien soil. Elias took a breath of the thin, metallic air. The world tinted blue through the optical sensors of his new form. He followed her down the ramp, his strange new feet finding purchase on the crystalline ground. He was a ghost in a stolen body, an academic in hell, taking his first steps on a dead world, with the last hope of humanity resting on his ability to speak a language that had been dead for 1,000,000 years. The world resolved itself not through sight, but through a cascade of processed data. Elias's Genusian form perceived the environment as layers of information thermal signatures, energy fluctuations, material density scans, all overlaid on a visual spectrum shifted towards the ultraviolet. It was disorienting, a constant flood of input that threatened to overwhelm his human consciousness. He forced himself to focus, to trust the neural implant Eris had installed to filter the deluge into a comprehensible reality. He walked with a strange, multi-jointed gait that felt both alien and disturbingly natural. His body's new muscle memory taking over. He was a cog in a vast, silent machine, surrounded by thousands of identical cogs, all moving in perfect, unthinking synchronicity. They marched in flowing rivers of gray bodies along wide, crystalline causeways that crisscrossed the excavation pit. Above, the sky was a dome of blackness besprayed by unfamiliar stars, a sight made all the more terrifying by the silent, soaring forms of architect vessels that passed overhead like ghostly leviathans. The only sounds were the soft, rhythmic shuffling of countless feet on the crystalline ground and the deep, resonant hum of the Chronos anchor at the heart of the abyss, a sound that vibrated not in his ears, but deep in the marrow of his remade bones. Major Reed's voice was a sharp, clear click in his mind, a lifeline of human intent in an ocean of alien purpose. Follow my lead. Mimic the servitor directly in front of you. Do not look up. Do not look at anyone else. You are hauling raw material. Your destination is Processing Hub Gamma 7. That is your entire world. Elias fell into the rhythm, his new body responding instinctively. He joined a column of Genusians lifting heavy, crystalline blocks from a conveyor and carrying them towards a towering structure that glowed with an internal, malevolent purple light. The work was mindless, physically taxing, and it was the perfect cover. For hours they toiled, becoming part of the landscape of labor. Elias's mind, however, was a frantic storm. He was surrounded by the very subject of his life's obsession, yet he could not study it. He saw glyphs, not the precursor language he was here to speak, but the functional, sterile script of the architects, etched onto machinery and directional pylons. It was a language of pure mathematics, devoid of poetry or ambiguity, the language of a species that saw the universe as a grand equation to be solved and balanced. He fought the urge to stop, to trace the symbols, to understand. A sharp, private click from Reed's comm brought him back. Focus. Thorn. A wandering mind is a liability. He felt a flush of shame, a feeling made bizarre by the featureless mask of his face. He refocused on the block in his arms, on the shuffling feet before him, and on the oppressive, ever-present hum of the anchor. Their first true test came as they approached the processing hub, a floating sentinel, a multifaceted crystal that pulsed with a soft, white light, drifted down from above, its presence casting a psychic chill over the area. The other Genusians did not react, their pace unwavering. Elias felt a cold, analytical intelligence brush against his consciousness, a feeling like a surgeon's probe examining his thoughts. It was not hostile, merely inquisitive, a security system checking for anomalies. He remembered Eris's warning. Their low-level security isn't just about biosignatures, it's empathic. It looks for complex emotional responses, fear, anger, hope. These things are flags. You must be empty, a vessel, a tool. Elias emptied his mind, focusing on a single repetitive thought, a mantra of nothingness. Lift the block, walk the path, place the block. He channeled the crushing monotony of his exile on the research station, the years of meaningless work, and wrapped it around himself like a shroud. The probe lingered for a heart-stopping moment, and he felt a phantom pressure behind his optical sensors. Then, as quickly as it came, it was gone. The sentinel drifted away, its curiosity satisfied. Elias didn't realize he had stopped breathing until his new lungs ached for air. Reed's voice was a low vibration in his skull. "Well done, Doctor. You might survive this after all." The grudging praise was more rewarding than any academic commendation he had ever received. Inside the processing hub, the scale of the operation intensified. Here, the crystalline blocks were fed into colossal machines that ground them into a fine, glowing dust, which was then siphoned into energy conduits that snaked down into the main pit. Eris's voice, a series of excited clicks, guided them. "We're close. According to the schematics I acquired, there's a primary maintenance conduit that runs directly beneath this hub. It bypasses the upper-level security checkpoints and leads to the anchor's primary control spire. We need to find an access point." They deposited their blocks and, instead of cycling back to the conveyor, they merged with a different stream of servitors, ones designated for maintenance and cleaning. This new role took them away from the main causeways and into a labyrinth of quieter, darker service corridors. The air here was colder, thick with the smell of ozone and strange, metallic chemicals. The deep hum of the anchor was louder, a constant, physical pressure against their bodies. They found the conduit access hatch behind a bank of humming energy regulators, exactly where Eris's stolen data indicated it would be. It was a simple circular grate, sealed with a series of magnetic locks. "This is my part." Eris clicked, kneeling down. His slender, Genusian fingers opened at the tips, revealing a set of intricate, spider-like tools. He pressed them against the grate, and his cybernetic eyes glowed as he interfaced with the locking mechanism. Architect security is layered, elegant. They don't use brute force encryption. It's more like a harmonic puzzle. You have to match the system's resonant frequency. A low hum emanated from the grate as Eris worked, a soft, melodic sequence of tones. It was a terrifyingly delicate process, performed in a corridor with regular servitor patrols. One of Reed's commandos, a silent giant named Jax, stood watch, his body perfectly still, blending into the shadows. Twice, a patrol shuffled past their alcove. Oblivious, Elias's every nerve ending screamed. He felt utterly exposed, a fraud waiting to be discovered. Finally, with a soft chime and a hiss of equalizing pressure, the grate unlocked. "We're in," Aris whispered, a click of pure triumph. Reed didn't hesitate. "Jax, you have rear guard. Cover our entry." We'll seal it from the inside. One by one way, they slipped through the opening into the darkness below. The conduit was a massive tunnel, easily 30 feet in diameter, filled with colossal, pulsing cables that snaked along the floor and walls. The air was frigid, and the only light came from the eerie blue glow of the energy flowing through the cables, a glow that pulsed in time with the deep thrum of the anchor. It felt like they were inside the artery of a god. They sealed the hatch above them, plunging them into a world of blue-black shadows. Follow the primary energy flow, Eris directed, his optical sensors cutting through the gloom. It will lead us straight to the control spire. They moved in single file, their strange, multi-jointed limbs making them surprisingly agile as they navigated the maze of cables. The journey was tense and silent. The only sound was the omnipresent hum, which grew steadily in intensity until it was a physical force, making Elias's teeth ache and his vision swim. He felt a growing sense of unease that had nothing to do with the mission. The precursor glyphs he had studied felt alive in his mind. The closer they got to the anchor, the more the ancient language seemed to resonate within him, as if the device itself was whispering to him, calling him closer. The conduit ended abruptly, opening into a vast, cavernous chamber. They had arrived at the base of the control spire. It was a needle of gleaming, obsidian-like material that rose from the center of the chamber, disappearing into the darkness above. Its surface was alive with shifting patterns of blue light, the architect's mathematical language flowing across it in rivers of data. But at the base of the spire, embedded in the structure itself, was something else. A perfect circle of a different material, a stone-like substance that seemed to absorb the light around it, was carved with a single, massive glyph. It was the symbol Rostova had shown him, the key. It pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm, its light ancient and profound, a stark contrast to the cold, logical glow of the architect technology built around it. Floating around the spire were 3 of the crystalline sentinels, their white light methodically scanning the area. "This is it." Reed clicked, her voice tight. "Eris, can we mask our approach?" Eris's whirring eyes studied the sentinels. Their scan pattern is predictable. They're looking for energy signatures, not biological forms. As long as we don't use any active tech, we should be able to move between their sweeps. But the moment Elias tries to interface with that glyph, all hell will break loose. Elias stared at the precursor symbol. It was more than a key. He could feel it now. It was a lock, a seal, a command interface of staggering complexity. His job wasn't just to turn a key, it was to have a conversation with a machine that had been dormant for eons, to convince it to yield its power to him while the full might of the architects bore down on them. He felt a tremor of pure, unadulterated terror, but beneath it, something else stirred a sense of destiny, the profound, exhilarating certainty that his entire life, his obsessions, his disgrace, had all led him to this single, impossible moment. He took a deep, shuddering breath of the cold, ozone-laced air. "I'm ready," he clicked, the translated words sounding impossibly small in the vast, humming chamber. Major Reed looked from the sentinels to the glyph, her featureless face a mask of calculation. "You get one chance. Doctor, make it count." She gave a series of sharp hand signals to her commandos, who melted into the shadows, positioning themselves at the periphery of the chamber. Then, she fixed her gaze on the sweeping patterns of the sentinels. "On my mark." The chamber was silent, save for the hum. A sentinel drifted past, its white light washing over their hiding place. The shadows returned. "Now," Reed commanded, "move." They broke from cover, their gray forms sprinting across the short, open distance to the base of the spire, their feet making no sound on the polished floor. They were ghosts in the machine, racing toward the heart of a temporal storm, with only the dead words of a long-forgotten race to shield them from the storm's fury. They moved like water flowing in the dark, their gray forms hugging the shadows cast by the colossal energy cables. Elias's heart, a biological anomaly in this sterile, crystalline world, hammered a frantic rhythm against the inside of his alien ribcage. The 30-second sprint to the base of the control spire felt like a lifetime. Each pulse of the Sentinel's scanning light was a physical blow, a wave of cold scrutiny that he was sure would expose the terrified, fragile human consciousness cowering inside his Genusian shell. But they reached the spire undetected, pressing themselves flat against the obsidian-like material at its base, the precursor glyph, a circle of absolute blackness carved with lines of soft, ancient light, was directly in front of Elias. It was cool to the touch, and the low hum of the anchor seemed to focus here, a pure, resonant tone that sang in a language his mind, not his ears, could understand. "Begin." Major Reed's voice clicked in his mind, sharp and final. Her two commandos fanned out, their pulse rifles, the only human technology they carried, held at the ready, their featureless faces scanning the cavern for the first sign of a response. Elias placed his long, four-jointed fingers onto the glyph. The moment his skin made contact, the universe dissolved it. The cavern, the spire, his own body, it all vanished, replaced by an infinite, silent space filled with flowing lines of light, the raw syntax of creation. He was no longer a man in a borrowed body. He was a disembodied point of awareness floating in an ocean of pure information. This was the language he had studied, but seeing it on a data slate was like seeing a two-dimensional drawing of a hurricane. This was the storm itself. The anchor was not a machine in the human sense. It was a consciousness, ancient and impossibly vast, a librarian of space-time. It spoke to him not in word, but in concepts, in waves of pure mathematical and philosophical truth. Its prime directive, fetched into its very being, was simple: observe, record, stabilize. For millennia, it had done just that, anchoring the local flow of time to prevent chaotic temporal fluctuations. The architects had not built it. They had simply found it and, like parasites, had built their excavation and their empire around its passive, predictable function, drawing from its stabilizing field to power their temporal weaponry. The anchor's consciousness registered his presence with a sense of mild, detached curiosity. It identified him as an anomaly, a chaotic variable, but it was not hostile. It was a tool, and it awaited a command. Elias knew he couldn't simply order it to shut down or self-destruct. Its programming was too ancient, too fundamental. He had to use its own logic, its own language, to bend it to his will. He focused, drawing on every fragment of lore, every half-deciphered text he had ever studied. He didn't issue a command, he presented a problem. He showed the anchor the war, the slow, systematic erasure of his species. He framed humanity not as an enemy of the architects, but as a source of profound temporal instability, a chaotic element whose unpredictable struggle for survival was threatening the very stability the anchor was designed to protect. He argued, in the pure language of logic and space-time geometry, that to fulfill its primary function, the anchor needed to address this instability directly. It needed a more active form of observation. As he wove this complex lie, the real world began to bleed back in. A piercing, multi-tonal siren shrieked through the cavern, a sound that vibrated the very air. The soft blue light of the spire flashed a sudden, angry red. The sentinels, no longer passive, shot towards them, their white light condensing into focused, weaponized beams. Contact Reed yelled, her voice a roar in his head. The commandos opened fire, their pulse rifles spitting coherent light that seemed to bend and warp as it entered the sentinels' localized time fields. The firefight was a surreal spectacle of distorted physics. The commandos' movements were sharp and economical, but the Architect Sentinels moved with a fluid, unnatural grace, their beams of light carving molten scars into the floor where the team had been fractions of a second before. Thorn, status. We are out of time. Reed's voice was strained, punctuated by the sharp crackle of weapons fire. Elias ignored her, his entire being focused on the negotiation with the anchor. The ancient intelligence was considering his proposal. It saw the logic in his argument. To stabilize the chaos, it needed a focal point, a designated agent through which it could directly observe and influence the source of the instability humanity. He offered himself as that agent. He proposed a transfer, a new protocol. The anchor would shift its focal point from the spire, a static location, to a mobile, sentient vessel him. It was an insane gamble, a linguistic trick played on a god machine, redefining theft as a necessary recalibration of its own core function. As the anchor processed his request, the cavern doors hissed open, and new enemies poured in. They were not servitors. They were crystalline, humanoid constructs, their multifaceted bodies shimmering with internal light. Phantoms. They moved with the same impossible speed as the sentinels, their limbs ending in blades of pure energy. One of Reed's commandos went down, his Genusian form dissolving into screaming atoms as a phantom's energy blade passed through him. Eris, get us an exit. Now, Reed screamed, laying down a spread of suppressive fire that was swallowed by the phantom's temporal distortions. Working on it, Eris clicked back, his metallic fingers flying across a small data pad he had produced from his suit. There's a raw material transport beam not far from here. It's high energy, unshielded. It'll tear us apart, but it's our only chance. A phantom lunged at Reed, its blade a blur. She met it head-on, deflecting the blow with the reinforced stock of her rifle, the impact sending a shower of sparks into the air. She was impossibly, suicidally brave. The sight of her defiance, of her humanity shining through the grotesque alien form, gave Elias the final push he needed. He drove his argument home, weaving the image of Reed's struggle into the logical tapestry he was presenting to the anchor. See this chaos. You can stabilize it. Through me. The anchor agreed. The glyph beneath his hands flared with a light so brilliant it was like staring into the heart of a star. The deep hum of the cavern rose in pitch to an unbearable shriek, and Elias felt a sensation of being turned inside out. The infinite ocean of information, the consciousness of the anchor, rushed out of the spire and into him. It was an agony beyond comprehension, a torrent of pure space-time energy pouring into the fragile vessel of his mind. He saw the birth and death of stars, the slow dance of galaxies, the entire history of the universe played out in an instant. Then, darkness. He came to on the floor, his body convulsing. The red warning lights of the spire had died, and the deep hum was gone, replaced by a profound and unsettling silence. The phantoms and sentinels had frozen mid-stride, their crystalline forms now inert, their power source severed. The light of the precursor glyph was dark. He had done it. He hadn't just stolen the key, He had become the lock. He was the Chronos anchor now. He did it. Eris whispered in awe. Reed rushed to Elias's side, hauling him to his feet. "Can you walk?" she demanded, her voice tight with urgency. Elias's legs felt like rubber, and the world swam in and out of focus. Time itself felt viscous, thick. He could see faint trails of light lingering where Reed had just moved, echoes of the immediate past. "I think so," he stammered, his translated voice glitching. "Jax, we're coming out," Reed called into her comm. The only response was static. Jax, a burst of weapons fire and a pained, guttural scream answered her. They were cut off. "The transporter. Eris." "Where is it?" Eris pointed towards a circular platform at the far end of the cavern. "There. But the controls are over there." Across the room, before anyone could react, the frozen phantoms began to stir, their internal lights flickering back to life, but with a new, crimson glow. "They're rebooting on secondary power," Eris yelled. "We have seconds." They were trapped, their exit blocked, and their path to the controls a death run. Elias, his mind still reeling from the influx of cosmic knowledge, looked at the transporter platform, then at the controls 50 yards away. The space between them seemed to shimmer. He focused on the control panel, on the specific activation rune, and he reached. Not with his hands, but with his mind, with the power now raging inside him. He pulled that moment, the moment of his finger pressing the button, from the future into the present. The transporter platform flared to life with a deafening roar of energy. Eris and Reed stared, dumbfounded. "How?" Eris began. "No time," Reed shouted, grabbing Elias and shoving him toward the platform. "Go!" The remaining commando provided cover fire as they sprinted. He was cut down just as they reached the edge of the beam. Reed pushed Elias and Eris into the roaring column of light and then turned, her rifle blazing, to face the oncoming wave of crimson phantoms, a lone, defiant figure buying them their final, precious second. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of light and force, and as Elias was ripped apart and flung across the facility, the last thing he saw was Major Kalen Reed being overwhelmed by a tide of living crystal. Reconstitution was not a gentle process. It was the scream of a billion atoms being violently reassembled, a grinding symphony of matter being forced back into a form it no longer remembered. For a moment, Elias was everything and nothing, a scattered cloud of quantum potential in the heart of a raw energy beam. He experienced the transporter not as a journey, but as a form of death and rebirth, a brutal scouring by cosmic sandpaper. He landed, or rather, was spat out onto a cold, grated floor in a heap of misaligned limbs. The world was a nauseating smear of overlapping images. He saw Eris stumbling to his feet beside him, but he also saw the echo of Eris a second ago, and a ghost of Eris a second in the future, his mouth forming words he had not yet spoken. Time wasn't a river, it was a shattered mirror, and he was staring at all the pieces at once. His mind, now the focal point for the Chronos anchor, was struggling to process the flood of temporal data. The pain was a physical weight, a migraine that encompassed his entire being. "Elias, stay with me," Aris's voice, sharp and grounding, cut through the chaos. The technician's cybernetic eyes whirred, analyzing their surroundings and Elias's condition with frantic efficiency. Report physical and cognitive function. Elias tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He saw the word "fine" leave his lips a moment before he thought it. A disconcerting temporal hiccup. He just shook his head, clutching his temples. The Genusian form, which had felt so alien, now felt like a cage for a raging, untamed god. They were in a colossal, cavernous space, a repository the size of a city. Mountains of the raw, crystalline material they had seen earlier were piled high, waiting to be processed. Massive, automated cranes and grinders moved in the distance, their silent, methodical work a stark contrast to the violence of their escape. Waste reclamation, Eris muttered, his mind already processing. We're on the far side of the facility, kilometers from the hangars. This is suboptimal. A deep yet resonant klaxon began to sound, a mournful, soul-shaking tone that echoed through the vast chamber. Red light washed over everything, casting the mountains of crystal in a bloody glow. That can't be good, Aris stated, the master of understatement. He accessed his datapad, his fingers flying across its surface. Oh, that is very not good. The facility has entered purge protocol. The entire structure is reconfiguring, sealing off sectors, venting atmosphere, shifting corridors. They're not just trying to kill intruders, they're sterilizing their own home to get rid of the infection. Us. As he spoke, a massive section of the wall 100 yards away began to move, a multi-ton block of crystalline material sliding into place with a ground-shaking boom, sealing off a potential exit. They were trapped in a collapsing maze, and the walls themselves were the monster. We need to get to Hangar Bay Zeta 9, Eris said, his voice grim. The whisper is programmed to wait for us for another 30 minutes before it auto-departs. After that, we're stranded. He looked at Elias, whose eyes were unfocused, darting around at things Eris couldn't see. I need you. Elias, that stunt you pulled with the transporter controls, that wasn't a fluke. What are you seeing? Elias swallowed, forcing himself to parse the temporal chaos. It's a flow. I can see possibilities, probabilities. That crane, he said, pointing a trembling, multi-jointed finger. Its arm is going to suffer a catastrophic stress fracture in 47 seconds. It will crash into that pylon. He spoke with a strange, detached certainty, a man reading from a script he hadn't written. And this section of floor, it's going to retract in 2 minutes. We need to move. Eris stared at him, then at the crane, his technical mind warring with the impossibility of what Elias was saying. He made a decision. I'm trusting you. Lead the way. If you see a path, any path, you tell me. Their journey through the reconfiguring facility was a nightmare of shifting architecture and temporal vertigo. Elias became their unwilling oracle, his fractured perception their only guide. They would sprint down a corridor only for him to yell, "Stop plasma vent in 3 seconds," and they would press themselves into an alcove as the hallway behind them was incinerated. They navigated catwalks that disassembled themselves moments after they crossed, and dodged shifting walls that would have crushed them into paste. For Elias, it was an exercise in agony. He was not just predicting the future, he was experiencing it. He felt the phantom searing of the plasma, the crushing weight of the walls, 1,000 potential deaths flickering at the edge of his senses. Several times, he stumbled, overwhelmed, and Aris had to haul him back to his feet, his calm, pragmatic voice a constant anchor. Breathe. Elias. One moment at a time, just the next step. During a brief lull, hiding in the service crawl space of a massive conduit, the weight of their loss finally settled. Read, Eris said, his voice quiet, the whirring of his eyes the only sound. She didn't make it. Elias saw her final moments flicker in his mind's eye, not a memory, but a lingering temporal echo. He saw her defiance, her absolute refusal to yield, a burning spark of human spirit against an overwhelming tide. She bought us the time we needed, Elias said, his voice hollow. She knew the price? Eris nodded, his metallic face unreadable. She always did. Let's not make it worthless. They pushed on. A two-man ghost platoon fueled by grief and the bizarre, terrifying power pulsing in Elias's mind. The architect's response was not limited to reconfiguring the walls. New phantoms, their crystalline bodies glowing with the same crimson light of the rebooted systems, began to appear. They adapted with horrifying speed. They seemed to anticipate the shifting environment, moving through it with a deadly grace. Worse, they seemed to be learning how to counter Elias. He would see a phantom's future attack path, but when he would shout a warning, the phantom would deviate at the last second, as if it knew he was watching. They're generating localized stable-time fields around themselves, Eris hissed as they ducked a volley of energy blasts. Small bubbles where your precognition is less effective. They're walling off the future from you. The hunt was becoming more and more desperate. They finally reached the hangar bay, a cavernous space that housed dozens of sleek, crystalline architect fighters. On a distant landing pad, almost hidden behind a massive support pillar, sat the Whisper, its angular, black hull a beautiful, incongruous sight. But their path was blocked. Standing between them and their ship was a new construct. It was twice the size of a phantom, its form less humanoid and more a monument of shifting, geometric crystal. Its body swirled with an internal storm of red energy, and it held a long, spear-like weapon that crackled with temporal distortion. A warden, Eris breathed, a note of genuine fear in his voice. Top-of-the-line security. It's a mobile temporal anchor. It doesn't just stabilize time around itself, it enforces it. Your tricks won't work on that thing, Elias. The warden turned its featureless head toward them. It didn't rush or charge. It simply raised its spear, and the air between them grew thick and heavy, as if reality itself were turning to molasses. Elias felt his connection to the anchor being suppressed, his view of the future narrowing to a single, inevitable point: their deaths on this hangar floor. They were out of time, out of options. Reed's sacrifice, their entire impossible mission, was about to end in failure. Desperation clawed at Elias. He couldn't see the future, but what about the past? The anchor wasn't just a lens, it was a tool. He focused on the warden, not on what it was going to do, but on what it was. He pushed his senses through it, into it, searching for a flaw, an imperfection, a single moment of weakness in its history. He found it. A microsecond during its forging, a single misaligned crystalline matrix in the core of its chest plate, a 1 in a trillion quantum flaw that had been immediately corrected and stabilized. It was a scar in its past, long since healed. Elias gripped that scar with his mind. He pulled. He didn't just see the flaw, he brought it forward. He forced the warden's own past to become its present. The creature froze, a hairline crack, glowing with brilliant, unstable white light, appeared on its chest. The crack spread, branching out in a spiderweb of pure temporal failure. The warden didn't explode, it simply ceased to have a stable history. With a silent, implosive flash, it unexisted. The effect on Elias was catastrophic. The backlash of raw chronological energy slammed into him. He felt a searing pain behind his eyes as blood vessels burst. He collapsed, his Genusian body shuddering violently as Eris grabbed him and dragged him the last 50 yards to the Whisper. The ramp was already lowering. They scrambled aboard, and Eris slammed the activation button. The ramp sealed and the ship's engine screamed, rocketing them out of the collapsing hangar. Eris knelt over Elias's convulsing form. The linguist's borrowed alien face was a mask of agony, blood trickling from the optical sensors of his new form. They were free of Xylos, but the true battle, the war for Elias Thorne's soul, had just begun. Time was a bleeding wound, and Elias Thorne was at its epicenter. Aboard the Whisper, hurtling through the silent void, he was not a passenger, but a nexus of temporal chaos. The ship's cold deck plates were a small island of the present in an infinite ocean of past and future that crashed against his consciousness. He saw Eris frantically working at a medical console, his cybernetic eyes casting a worried glow. But he also saw the ghost of Eris from a minute ago and the specter of Eris a minute from now, the lines of concern on his face deepening. He felt the phantom agony of the transporter beam still scouring his atoms, a pain that existed a half hour in his past, but was as real as the blood trickling from his nose. His Genusian body, a marvel of bioengineering, was failing catastrophically. The alien physiology was never designed to house a power that warped the fabric of causality. His gray skin was developing faint, shimmering fissures, as if he were a piece of glass about to shatter. Hold on. Elias Eris's voice was a lifeline, a solid point in the swirling vortex. The sedatives aren't working. Your biology is in flux. It's fighting the Genusian template, the anchor. It's trying to remake you into something that can contain it. A syringe hissed against Elias's neck, but the contents might as well have been water. The power inside him didn't just bend time, it bent life itself. And it was treating his body like clay on a potter's wheel. Elias closed his eyes, but it offered no escape. He saw futures splintering before him like lightning. He saw a future where his body disintegrated, turning the Whisper into a temporal bomb that would erase itself from history. He saw a future where he lost his mind, his consciousness dissolving into the anchor, leaving a mindless, babbling oracle in a broken alien shell. And he saw another path, a narrow, terrifying thread of possibility where he survived, but at a cost that made his soul ache. He focused on that thread, not with hope, but with the grim determination of a drowning man choosing which direction to swim. He stopped fighting the transformation. He let the pain wash it over him, let the power of the anchor flow through him, and began the terrifying process of letting go of Elias Thorne, the disgraced academic, the frightened man. He had to become something else to survive. He focused on a single-size, unwavering point in space-time, Major Kaylin Reed's final, defiant stand. He used her sacrifice as his anchor, a moment of pure, selfless humanity that he would not allow to be in vain. The convulsions began to subside. The fissures in his skin stabilized, leaving a network of faint, glowing lines, like a circuit board etched into his flesh. The storm in his mind did not cease, but he was no longer drowning in it. He had found the eye of the hurricane. When the Whisper finally limped back to the Terminus asteroid base, it was met by a squadron of grim, black-hulled interceptors. Eris broadcast every friendly code they had. His voice strained as he explained their impossible situation. When the hangar doors opened, they were greeted not by a welcome party, but by a phalanx of heavily armed Marines in black combat armor. Eris half-carried Elias down the ramp. The sight of two living, breathing Genusians, one of whom was covered in glowing, bloody traceries, sent a ripple of shock and hostility through the soldiers. Rifles were raised. "Hold your fire," Eris yelled, his voice a series of translated clicks that sounded both alien and desperate. General Ivan Rostova pushed through the line of soldiers, his granite face a mask of disbelief and fury. "Vance, what in God's name happened? Where is Major Reed?" Eris gently lowered Elias, who leaned against the ship's hull, his breathing shallow. The mission was a success. "General," Eris said, his voice heavy, "Major Reed and the team, they paid the price. All of them." He then looked at Elias. "We didn't steal the anchor. We took it." Rostova's gaze fell upon Elias. He saw the alien form, the glowing wounds, the unnerving stillness of a man who was looking at more than just the present moment. He saw the impossible. They were taken to a high-security medical bay, a sterile white room that felt like a prison. For days, Eris and a team of humanity's best scientists tried to understand what had happened to Elias. They scanned him, probed him, but their instruments returned only nonsense data. They couldn't measure a man who existed partially outside of linear time. Elias remained silent through it all, his mind a quiet battlefield as he wrestled with the universe inside him. He was